Hello and welcome to this recording of Weave GitOps Enterprise. What we're going to show you today is around application developers being able to deploy applications across multiple environments and using progressive delivery to safely deploy their application. So here we have Weave GitOps Enterprise. Weave GitOps Enterprise runs on a management cluster, Kubernetes cluster inside your environment. And is normally set up by an infrastructure team or a platform team on behalf of application developer. We've already created an application developer tenant for deploying application using the platform login or the admin login. So here we have the login for the tenant, and we can see two clusters that the tenant can use. We can inspect those clusters and the details about those clusters and how it's been provisioned. This is actually a cluster API cluster. We can click on applications. We can see a list of applications deployed to those clusters, all the versions of Helm charts, and the commit shards for any customizations that are deployed. Now we have a number of functions here, including a pipelines view, which shows you the promotion view of an application, but we haven't actually created an application yet. Now, if you're using our user interface, the way you would do that is by clicking on Create Pipeline. That would take you to your pipelines templates. We've created one for this particular app team. And if I click on use this pipeline, we basically just need a cluster name and namespace for the target cluster, and to set 3 of the namespaces for the application to be deployed to for each of the environments. Everything else is generated for you and is part of the template. Of course, anything you do in our user interface, we can preview a pull request, which will show us the output of the template and all the files it would generate. But when we're actually ready to make a change, then we would actually authenticate directly with our Git repository manager, in this case GitHub, and that would create a pull request and all the files for the change for us from the template. But in fact, I'm not actually going to do that. Our user interface is very useful and gives you good observability of GitOps applications running in your cluster. What's a better developer experience is if they can do it in their IDE. So we also enable our template engine via the command line interface, but we also have a GitOps plugin to Visual Studio Code, which allows us to see our cluster, manage deployments across our clusters. Now here we have the management cluster, where the cluster definitions are for the managed clusters, the leaf clusters, but also where we deploy templates from. So when I connect to the management cluster with the GitOps plugin, I can see all of the templates there. I can inspect the template if I actually want to see the code of the template, and I can see the templates of what it's going to create. So these are the objects that are going to be created by the template. So we have a namespace object, and then they get the parameters from the form are filled in to the template itself. We've got quite an advanced template language as well that allows us to use Go templating and a number of functions within the template. Now, when I'm ready to create an instance of the template, I can just click Create there. We can find the correct repository that we want and load the template up, and then we can edit the parameters for the template. In fact, I'm going to leave these as default as these are all correct. So this is the target cluster and namespace, and then we've got 3 namespaces in the target cluster we're going to create to deploy our application to. So if I go ahead and save that, it generates all of the template objects for me. And then if I go and have a look at my Git repository, I can see that in my Fleet repository, I've created all of these files, which include deployment files, namespace creation, notification are sent out from target namespace for an environment when the application is deployed correctly. We also have a secret that's needed for the automated promotion, and a pipelines view which describes the rules for promotion. So let's go ahead and add them all to a pull request. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and commit that. I'm committing to main, which of course normally an application developer would have to go through a pull request, but just for speed, I'm just committing this directly to main. Okay, so now we've done that, and we should be able to see the application deploy to the target cluster. Now again, we don't really want to leave VS Code. We can stay in the GitOps plugin in VS Code to actually have a look at the destination cluster. Here it is. If we just set our context, we can now see the objects on the target cluster, and we can see any sources or workloads that are deployed to that cluster. So we can see all of the platform components at the moment while we wait for the deployment to happen. Now, if we wanted to view that in the user interface, of course we could. Now we have the pipeline view, and we can see that we've got the application, the target cluster, and the target environments. And we can see the namespaces for each of the environments and the application that's being deployed there. From VS Code, we can now see the namespaces have been created, and we can see that that Helm release for that application is currently installing. It's progressing at the moment. And if we click on that, we can also see the individual objects that are being deployed as part of that Helm release. Now, this is interesting. We see a canary object here. Now, a canary object allows us to do a canary rollout of an application, which we can inspect in the user interface. If we want to go into some details, we can actually click on the delivery component here, and we can see that the initial of the deployment has completed. We are ready for the application to be rolled out to a new version. Okay, so now we've got a pipeline and we've got the initial version of the application deployed. We should be able to use that to see the application. So here we have the development version of the application, which has got quite an awful color background. So I think we probably need to go ahead and make a change to that and then roll that out across our environments. Okay, so let's go back to VS Code. Okay, so let's go to my application repository itself. So this is the podinfo, application promotion podinfo repo. Let's have a look at the code of my application. Okay, so looking at the code here. Oh, well, that's the problem. Here we are. The UI color is FF. Okay, so let's make that something a little bit less purple. Okay, let's go for a nice shade of blue. Okay, so here we go. Let's just copy that and we will paste it there. So we've succeeded in changing the color, our background color of the user interface in our app in the code itself. Now, in order to do a full release of that, I would need to change the version number of the application. And then, of course, because I'm going to roll it out as a Helm chart, I need to update the Helm chart as well to do a full release. So the values file, we need to increment the version of the container here and the app version for the Helm chart there. And we'll increment the version of the Helm chart as well. Okay, so now we've done all those changes. Let's go back to source control, and we can see all those changes are waiting to be staged. So let's add them. Okay, now unfortunately I haven't done this yet, so we need to create a new branch. Okay, there we go. We've managed to create a new branch. So now we can make our commit. Okay, there we go. And now, because we've got a new branch, we're going to publish the branch and we're going to create a pull request against that branch automatically. Okay, we've hit a slight problem. So we've hit a bug with the GitHub pull request plugin where we've been rate limited. I think we've been doing too many requests. We can just go to GitHub itself, and there we go. We see our branch change color, and we can create that pull request. And now any CI tests that we have in our repository would now run. Let's go back to VS Code. You can see our pull request here. Okay, so we've got 3 checks passed. This includes some policy checks that we run in the repository to catch Any changes to the deployment code that would infringe policy controls, organizational policy controls, or best practice. We're releasing the container or checking that the versions are correct, and then releasing the container and pushing to the container registry. And then once all of those checks and tests have passed, we can then go ahead and merge the pull request. Okay, so now we can see that the tests have passed, and now we're ready to merge. And when we merge this, of course, the Helm chart release will happen. Now, one thing that we haven't done is actually checked the version of our app ourselves. Well, because we've created a pull request, we've got a feature called GitOps sets, which allows us to point a GitOps set, which is effectively a template, with a generator. And a generator can be pointed at a pull request or a repository, and for every pull request, it will actually implement the template. So here we can see two objects that have been created by this pull request, a Git repository that points out that specific pull request, and the Helm release object, which refers to the Helm release object in the repository directory, not the released version, but the one in the pull request. So here we can see some metadata about the pull request. We can click on the pull request URL for GitHub. We can see the commit ID and the repository URL on GitHub. But this is the most important one, which is the one that allows us to check it. Okay, so here we have version 536. That is the new version, and we can see the new color that we've set, the blue color instead of the pink. So what we can do then to release that is to actually merge the pull request. So once we merge the pull request, that will then run a Helm chart release action that will release the newer version 147 of the Helm chart. Now here we have the development environment that's on the container version 535. When we want to see the new one, it will be 536 and the background will be blue. So how do we see the rollout progress? Well, we can look in the pipelines view here. We can see here in our dev environment, we have a target cluster and we have a target app. And the specification said that it wants any version, so the latest version, so XXX is the specification of the version number. The deployed version is we've just released 147, so we should be able to see the version upgrade here as soon as that release process finishes. In fact, let's go and check in GitHub how far that's got. That's just finished, so the release has been done. We can just, oh, there we go. So we can see 147 is now trying to install the 147 version of the Helm chart. Now it's going to take a little while to install that, and not because it takes a long time, but because we're waiting for the canary analysis to complete. So here we have a canary process. Progressive delivery, which is basically a rolling out of an application using a canary object and shifting some of the traffic to the canary to test the new application and measuring the metrics in Prometheus. The metrics should allow you to measure HTTP errors and latency. If the latency increases beyond a threshold, or too many HTTP errors increase across the threshold, then what will happen is the application will automatically roll back and it will not progress the application to the new version. If, however, the checks pass without exceeding the threshold, then what will happen is that the canary will be promoted to the primary, the canary will be scaled down to 0, and the primary will be taking all the traffic. So we can see that that's got to step 4 out of 10, which means 20% of the canary traffic is now going, or 25% is now going to the canary. Now we're in the dev environment, so if we come over here, there we go, we can start seeing some of our traffic is now going to the canary. And now back to the primary canary. Now we should be nearing the end of the process. So if we check here, we can see now we're up to, and now we can see the promotion is starting to happen. So we've got the promoting. If we have a look at the objects, we can see that the version is now 5.3 in the primary, and the canary is being scaled down. The replicas will scale down to 0. That should have just happened. I've just refresh that. You can see the replicas are in fact 0 now. So we've rolled out a canary and the canary process has succeeded. Now if we go back and have a look at our pipeline, we will now see that PodInfo has deployed and it's finished deploying, and it's 147 now. And now we've actually promoted, we've triggered the promotion event to staging. Now you can have a button here. If we've got automated true, then you don't get the button, it runs automatically. If you have automated false, then you get a button in the user interface. If I click that button, then what it's going to do is it's going to create the pull request for me. This is the pull request that automates the staging environment to go from 146 to 147, and we can see that here. We've got a couple of checks that are going to run just to make sure we haven't broken anything. We've made a very small change, and then once those checks are complete, we will just go ahead and merge that pull request to promote the application to the next environment. Of course, this goes through all your normal approval processes for a Git repository, so it can be reviewed by others before promotion. So for speed, I'm just going to go ahead and merge that. Okay, so going back here, we should now see this version move to 147, as that's now the requested version in the Git repository has been updated. And so this will change to 147, and then we will see the deployment to the staging environment happen. There we go. So 147 is now the requested version, and now we can see that it's actually in the process of deploying at the moment. We can go ahead and we can watch that process if we want to. Again, it's running the canary process. So if we want to inspect the canary process, we can go over here and we can see that we're in step 1 of 10. And we can see that we're getting 5% of the traffic is going to the canary at the moment. And that will progress to 50% and then promote the application. Then that triggers another promotion event, which from our pipelines view, we will get another button. This will say promote 147 once this is completed. And then when I click the button, that will create another pull request to change the version in the production environment. So we've combined VSCode and our VSCode plugin that shows us deployment of our applications in our view here, so we can inspect the different applications. We can see which versions are deployed. We've got 147, 146, and that one's progressing at the moment. We can see that's updating, and when that's finished deploying, we will see that go to 147, and we'll be able to see this in production go up to 147 once we've done that promotion as well. We've also done the rollout with progressive delivery. Because we've done the rollout with progressive delivery, we can be sure that any changes that we've made will not degrade performance, as performance is tested before promoting to the next environment. The rollout has now completed, and we can see that the staging environment is now upgraded to 147. We can see that in our VSCode plugin just by refreshing. There we go, 147, 147 in staging as well, and we're just going to promote to production shortly. If we go back here, we can see the promote button has updated to 147, as that was now successfully deployed in the previous environment. And if I want to go ahead and promote it into production, then I would click the button here, which will create me a pull request, which would go through the usual review process of somebody reviewing. And then after the review's been approved, then we can merge that and deploy to production. Again, once we deploy into production, we're just using the same canary rollout process as before, where this will update to 147 and we'll deploy the application to 147 using the progressive delivery rollout process, which we can see here is the production one. It will roll out shortly. Well, thank you for listening and good luck with all your GitOps.